Mandi and Radha Kalachandjidam. For those of you who are listening in online, if you're in some distant location, that's Dallas, Texas, y'all. Thank you all very much for joining me this morning. Those of you who are in the temple room, one significant family is present with all members. Shishivat Kalachandji. I do. Is it possible to have some? It's a beautiful day in Dallas, Texas. This is the kind of day that we wish to remember when it's August 15th. This morning we're going to be reading from the Bhagavad Gita, 2 texts, and both verses are numbered 47. So we're going to be reading first of all from chapter 18, text 47, and then from chapter 2, text 47. And don't ask me how it came out that way, it just did. First of all, our invocation to the Supreme Lord, asking Him to be with us and give us some words to speak. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Nitai Gaura Premananda Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrjaka Charja Hasto Tarasata Sri Srimad is divine loving grace. Srila Avoya Charanadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrjaka Charja Hasto Tarasata Sri Srimad is divine grace. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON Guru Parampara Ki. Shri Rup Shri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhana Ki. Shri Vrindavandam Ki. Shri Mathura Dham Ki. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki. Shri Shri Radha Kalachandi Dham Ki. Ganga Devi Ki. Jamuna Mai Ki, Tulsi Devi Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Briyat Madanga Transcendental Book and Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki, Nitai Gaura Premananda, Hari Hari Bol, all glories to thee, assembled devotees. All glories to thee, assembled devotees. All glories to thee, assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namade Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Bhadi Pacharne Nivishesha Shunivari Pastatare Shatani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Yasan Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasapresha Bandreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Grantaraj, well, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaura Premananda. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you very much. So, if you will, please look with me on your phones, or if you're at home, in your Bhagavad Gita, go to chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, and we'll be reading from text number 47. I want to talk this morning a little bit about doing one's occupational duty, because I realize that even though some of us are retired and we don't have to go to a job, some of us are regular servants of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, so our job is here in the temple community. Still, there are others of us that by circumstance we are forced to go out and earn a livelihood, either at the workplace or at our home in a place that we have internet connections. Text number 47 of chapter 18. I will recite, and if you will, then afterward repeat. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharmat swanustitat swabhava niyatam karma kurvan apnoti kilbisham Shreyan swadharma viguna. Repeat after me, please. Shreyan, better. Swadharma, one's own occupation. Viguna, imperfectly performed. Paradharmat, than another's occupation. Su anustitat, perfectly done. Swabhava niyatam, prescribed according to one's nature. Karma, work. Kurvan, performing. Na, never. Apnoti, achieves. Kilbisham, sinful reactions. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. And that was the translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Before we begin reading the purport, I would just like to give you part of my reason for choosing this selection, choosing this topic today. And there was a time when I had been working as an engineer in East Tennessee for about 5 years. And I became so disgusted with the kind of association that I had working with other engineers and draftsmen and staff, um, having to go to the same office every day and listen to the same kinds of things being discussed, that I was really to the point of dropping out. So I did. On Wednesday, I gave my supervisor a note saying on Friday I'm out of here. So that was pretty much the sum and substance of it. And so my wife and I moved out to a little shanty on a 24-acre piece of land in the mountains above Knoxville, Tennessee. And there we sat for about 4 years. And we had our first child, and then our second child was coming along. And then we heard, before I left my last professional job, that well, actually, I received my first piece of literature on June 13, 1973. This was 4 days after the arrival of my firstborn son, and in that and so then I began looking around, and I understood that there was a farming community, which I was very much interested in at that time, up in West Virginia. And so I found a copy, somehow or other, came across a latest edition of Mother Earth News, an old hippie type magazine, which had some really good philosophy in it, had some good practical applications, told how to escape from the city, escape from your job, and get out into the country. And it also had a really nice article on the New Brindavan community in West Virginia, 1973, and it was pretty early on. So anyhow, I began communicating. Eventually, my wife and I made a trip up to West Virginia in, I think, 74, and we stuck around for about an hour or two, and it was kind of strange to us, so we left soon. But we had time to, I wanted to make a donation, so I did so, and they loaded me up with an armload of books. And in that armload of books, there was one book that I began reading when I got back to Tennessee, and that was the that was the Bhagavad Gita. And somehow or another, in my reading, I came across this text that it's better to engage in one's own occupation. And I began thinking, here I've spent so much time out here in the hills, and the only association I had was some really nice but very ignorant country people who had lived in the hills all their lives. Some of them had lived long enough to see electricity come into their valley for the first time. Lovely people. Claude and Goldie, an old couple, lived right down the road from us. So anyhow, we had the idea when we moved out there that somehow we wanted to start and become part of a functioning, self-sufficient rural community, because we thought that if it's anything that will bring a group of people together, it's the economic necessity. Well, I was wrong on that point, but I didn't know it. I had met the devotees, I'd gotten literature and such, and I'd been reading some. But eventually I came across this verse in the Bhagavad Gita 1847, chapter 18, text 47, that said that it's better to engage in your own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. And I thought, I've been out here in the wilderness, so to speak, for some time. Nothing's happening. The people that I'm associating with, several long-haired kids out that way. I say kids, they were as old as I was, in their 30s. And so I read this and I thought, maybe I'm doing something wrong. I was trained as an electrical engineer, and I'd been working in that way for quite some time. I think it's time that I went back and performed my own occupation, regardless of whether I performed it perfectly or not, instead of taking up the occupation of a farmer, because I had no real talent no background for that. And so I came across this verse, and so I want us to read some of the purport. And if you have your phone, I would like Manjari Gopika, would you please read the first paragraph in the purport? Oh, yes, we do have a microphone here somewhere.
One's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmin, although he may have been born into a Brahmin family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmin is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmin. For a Kshatriya, or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmin.
Okay. Nrsinga Rupa, please, would you, no, don't read. I don't want you to read. I want you to tell me something. Can you tell me who is speaking in this text, and to whom is that person speaking? And why? Why is he talking with him about one's occupational duty?
I believe this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he's speaking to him about his occupational duty because Arjuna's in a dilemma, a big dilemma, and he's the battlefield of Kurukshetra is about to happen, and he doesn't want to kill his family members. And he even said,
What's his reason for not wanting to kill family members? They were inimical toward him, so why shouldn't he kill them?
That, it would, by killing the family members, it would bring upon, Varna Shankara, unwanted population, and the degradation of the world, and so many different things like that. And also, they were his teachers and grandparents and his respected elders. And so he thought better to go to the forest and let them have the kingdom than to have to kill them to then win the kingdom.
And so what was Arjuna wanting to do instead of participating in this heinous act of killing his relatives and his mentor and his spiritual master? What was he intending? What was he thinking to do?
I mean, in some ways, I guess you could say he was trying to do the work of a Brahmana instead of the work of a Kshatriya.
In particular, what was he intending to do?
Go to the forest, I believe. Go on pilgrimage.
Yeah, he just wanted to get the heck out of there and go to the forest and just make his living by doing what?
By begging, right?
By begging.
Yeah.
That's exactly correct. And so that's an acceptable thing to do for a Brahmin, to accept in charity his livelihood. But for a Kshatriya like Arjuna, no, it's not going to work. And besides, what about his elder brother Yudhishthira? He was a very Brahminical person, wasn't he? As a matter of fact, he's the son of Dharma, or what's another name for him?
Yamaraj.
Yamaraj. And so he was very, very well versed in one's duty and also in etiquette and dealing with others. And he did not. Yudhishthira was a godly man. Oh, so godly and so dutiful. My spiritual master once said when I was up in his quarters, he said, I just really would like to have the association of the Pandavas. And I thought I was just waiting for the next thing, and I expected him to say something about they're such handsome, powerful men, and they believed in treating people right. But I was kind of surprised at what he said. He says, because they're so dutiful, they perform their duty. And even when it's a really obnoxious task to have to perform, I mean, Yudhishthira and his brothers have tried for some years now, living in the association of the Kauravas, their cousins. They had tried to get along with them very well, but they were met with a lot of resistance because the elder brother of the Kauravas, Duryodhana, he was very envious of his cousins who had been, his 5 cousins who had been living up in the mountains with their father and their 2 mothers. And now their father had died untimely because of a curse, and his mother was, Kunti Devi, was left to take care of them. And they were told, she was told by the saintly persons there in their midst, and that's one of the reasons they lived in the mountains, because there were hermitages there of very saintly people. So she was told to leave the mountains and go back to Hastinapur, where she could be taken care of properly and live in a proper situation as a queen, which she was. She was the queen of her husband Pandu. And when they got back there, then the person who had been taking care of business, acting as a stand-in for Pandu while he was in the mountains with his kids, was the blind brother of Pandu, the elder brother of Pandu, Dhritarashtra. And so he had 100 sons? Or 99? Which? 100. Had 100 sons and 1 daughter. Did you know he had a daughter? Okay. She was not the daughter of Gandhari, but rather, as I understand it, she was the daughter of a maidservant. Or one of his queens, one of his other queens. Does anybody remember for sure? I think it was a maidservant, wasn't it? Anyhow, we don't hear too much about the daughter. Most of the attention of the Mahabharata is given to the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, the blind king. And so Yudhishthira was challenged at a number of different points to a gambling match. Of course, we know there were actually 2 gambling matches that he was asked to participate in. And in the first one, he wound up having to lose all of his wealth, his kingdom that Krishna had helped him construct out in one far distant deserted corner of the kingdom, and then he even lost his brothers. He had to put them up for the match, and so the question is always raised: why would he do that? Why would he continue? But it was said he was a Kshatriya, and whenever Kshatriyas are challenged, they have to meet the challenge. And so he did that, and he even lost his wife, Draupadi, their common wife, Draupadi. But of course, we know that Krishna came and saved Draupadi from being completely undressed in the company of some of the greatest people in the universe. And then Dhritarashtra finally relented and decided that he would give everything back to Yudhishthira. And so Yudhishthira and his brothers went back to their kingdom that was somewhat removed from Hastinapur. And that's where they were living for a time, but Duryodhana was not to be satisfied. And so instead of wanting to share the kingdom, he wanted all the kingdom that were under the the leadership right at this moment of Dhritarashtra, who was not really suited to be the emperor of the world because he was blind. And as it turns out, not only was he physically blind, but also he was spiritually blind. And so he permitted, because of his excessive love for his own son, Duryodhana, he permitted him to engage them again in another gambling match, in which of course, they won because he had, who was it, Shakuni, who was the gambler, who was expert in throwing dice, and Yudhishthira was not. He was not a gambler. He was a holy man, practically speaking. He was Raj Rishi. And so the Pandavas were then had to leave again, and this time they had to leave their own kingdom and go off into the forest for, I think, 14 years. And that 14th year, if they were identified by any of the spies that Duryodhana sent out, they were going to be required to go for another 14 years in exile from the kingdom. So finally, in that second 14th year, the Pandavas and Draupadi found themselves in taking shelter in the kingdom of Matsya, I believe was the kingdom that they were in. And they each went in individually, disguised, and took a position in the kingdom for different things. I remember Bhimasena went in as a cook, of course, and he had to be where there was lots of food. And then so the others took different positions in that kingdom. And then finally, when the 14th year was up, they were still there. And so they came out of the closet, so to speak, came out of hiding and presented themselves to the king of the Matsyas there, and told who they were. And so the only reason they had not gone into battle against Duryodhana, besides the fact that one of the requirements for losing the gambling match was to go into exile, another reason for not going it was that they didn't have any compatriots. What do we call them? Allies. Yeah, they didn't have any allies in Duryodhana because he had been there in Hastinapur all his life, and his father had been the emperor, and now he was hoping to become the emperor. He had allies all over the place. So anyhow, you remember what Yudhishthira asked that they give them that they would be satisfied with? 5 villages. He said, we are Kshatriyas. It is our duty to administrate and take care of the people. So we only are asking for 5 villages. And Duryodhana said he would not give them so much land as they could do what? Stick a pin into. Oh, that's not too much land. And so then the fight had to take place. So we're talking about performing one's occupational duty. The Pandavas had an occupational duty, and that was to administrate, because they were godly administrators. They were Kshatriyas. Not only were they physically extremely powerful, and they had been given the boon that they would not be killed. They could not be killed. Still, they had the duty to perform as administrators, and Yudhishthira was such a meek, gentle fellow that he said, just give us a village, one village each to rule, and Duryodhana would have no part of it. I guess he probably figured out that if they gained in their popularity as they had already left in Hastinapur, they were going to be ruling the world anyhow. So they went on, and so Arjuna then is right at the Battle of Kurukshetra at the beginning, and Krishna is telling him why he should fight. And what was the main reason that he gave Arjuna for fighting? What is it? Uphold Dharma. Okay? Krishna wanted it. He wanted them to fight that battle. Krishna had other plans other than just to help the Pandavas win back their kingdom. He wanted to take all of these military phalanxes off the planet and send some of them back to the heavenly planets in this material world, and take some of them back to the spiritual world from which they had come, to join him in his pastimes. So now let's see what the application is to what we're doing today. And I spoke about my own difficulties that I had in performing my work to the satisfaction of some people that I was dealing with. And as a result of that, then I became very disgusted and I gave it up. So why is there dissatisfaction in work? One of those is lacking the knowledge of one's own propensity. Sometimes in this age, young men seemingly more than young women do, find it very difficult to find an occupation that they want to stay in. And they don't, I think part of the reason for that is they have a certain propensity to do a certain kind of work. And what they've chosen to the field to go into was not exactly what they should have been doing. And I'm the example of that. I was not doing the kind of work and another thing was that I was not associating with the kind of people that I wanted to be with. I was a young married man when I went to work, and there was this one fellow that I was forced to work with because he was with the same company but with a different branch, and his main pastime was to go out to the bars and try to pick up women. And that just, I don't know, that just didn't seem to suit my personality too well, especially since I had a beautiful young wife back at home, and I didn't want to be unfaithful to her. I didn't want to spend a bunch of time with people getting drunk and talking about who knows what. And so we don't. Part of the problem is that we have to be in an environment that is not suited to us. In the past, it seemed like young people, this was before the days of transportation such as we have now, young people would stay in the area that they were brought up in. And generally, they would take up the work that their parents had done before, or at least one of their parents. Well, I found out later that I had two parents, a father and a mother. Strange, right? And my father was an electrician. He was a working class man, but he was an electrician, and so that was, I guess, part of the reason that I chose electrical engineering to go into. But as it turns out, my mother was a teacher, and she taught for all of her professional life, and my sister became a teacher. And so when I was in my 50s then, I had been teaching at the Gurukula here. I got a call from Maturnath Prabhu one day saying, "Hey, Rupanuga, you ever think about teaching?" He said, "We need someone to teach the older boys in the Gurukula." And this was 1992. And my wife, who was actually the administrator of the Gurukula at that time, had gone to India for her first and only visit there. Radha Vinod Prabhu had given her a ticket that he had bought for someone else, and I think Radha Gopinath, he could not go at that time, so Jayanti left and went to India. And so Maturnath was kind of filling in for her, and he had two boys that were in that class, and he was getting information from them that made him realize that they had to have somebody else. And so anyhow, I told Maturnath Prabhu, I've had a few courses in teacher education, University of Tennessee, but I don't know, we'd give it a shot. And so that's where I went and stayed for the next 4 years. And it was one of the best engagements that I had in my professional life. But then the boys got to be old enough that they could go off to college. And so I was left trying to decide, what am I going to do now? What am I supposed to do now? And so I decided that what came really natural and easy to me, probably because of a good high school teacher, was teaching English. So I decided at that time that I would go back to college and get enough, first get a master's degree in teacher education, get enough graduate credits in English that I could teach in the community colleges around, probably as an adjunct professor, because nobody enters in expecting to get tenure when you're in your 50s. That's not the time to do that. When you're in your early 20s, that's the time to make that decision, what you want to do. So I decided, well, all right, that's what I'll do. That seems to be the natural thing to do. And previously, my spiritual master had told me when I was doing some work with the Gurukula here, our temple president at that time wanted to get a business going, and so he asked for several of us to join him in that effort. And then so I got in and started making the effort, but Srila Gurudev, Tamal Krishna Goswami, came back from being away from the community, and he called me up to his room and said, "Rupanuga, why did you give up your service to the Gurukula?" And I said, "Because our temple president asked me to do that." He said, "No, but you should not have given up your service to the Gurukula." So anyhow, I found out from that experience with him that he could see much farther down the road than I could. I had no idea what I would wind up doing in life. I tried, selling for some time. That wasn't my cup of tea at all, back when I was a tea drinker. So I decided that I should take this position that I was offered with the Gurukula, and I taught the boys for 4 years. Sri Rupa was there for a short time. Singha Rupa was there for a short time. At that time, he was Sri Rupa. But then he left, and then it's when you went to India, wasn't it? Yeah. And then some of the other boys were there with me. My youngest son there, Bharat, was also in my class. So anyhow, I enjoyed it very much. And I don't know whether I should say this, but some days we'd come into the class and we'd start working for about 30 minutes. And I said, "Go home and change clothes, get yourself a lunch. We're going out to a state park." And that happened more times probably than my wife was hoping to have to admit. We spent a lot of time walking the trails and just discovering things out in the state parks. So anyhow, then that ended. I had to find out what to do, so I went back to school and started teaching in the community college. The reason that I chose in English, besides the fact that it came very natural to me, was that it also, I thought that it would permit me, I could have chosen math, as having been in engineering, but I would have had to get a master's degree in math to do that, and I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. It had already been too many years since I'd been out of school. And so the reason for the teaching English was to, I thought that, we'd be reading literature, we'd be writing essays and that sort of thing. I could get them involved in some rather interesting questions for their lives. And so, in other words, I could talk with them in a very offhanded way about Krishna consciousness. That's what I was really hoping to do. So, now this is a long story of my life. The purpose for telling you that is that I found out that even though I enjoyed doing my first job, engineering, I never liked the environment in which I had to do it. So for those of you who are listening in, who are still having to go out there and hit the bricks to make a livelihood for yourselves and your families, I encourage you, think about what you're doing, and if it's not the kind of environment that you find to be beneficial, if it's as it was with me, if your environment is detrimental, then you probably should be thinking about how to change that environment, and that could mean changing your profession at some time in life. So we have to find some satisfaction in the activities that we perform, especially if we're going to go to an office 8 days, 8 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. There better be something there that gives us some lasting satisfaction. Because if it's not, then we're going to have to go looking and see if we can find something. So that brings us back to devotional activities. And when we first moved to this community, it was understood that my wife and I and the three families that came also from Tennessee, we would be engaged in activities, and the temple would provide for our basic needs as a family. Well, there were no activities already set up except for book distribution. And there was very little money available in the community. So at some point in time, then, the decision was made by Tamal Krishna Goswami and the temple council or board, whatever it was at that time, that we're going to ask all the householders to go out and make a livelihood and raise their families, pay their expenses. And if you have any money left over, you can give some to the temple. Or if you can free up your spouse's time to come and serve in the temple, then that's good also. But he saw from the fact that my wife and I had chosen to leave the community after being here for the first 5 months. We chose to leave. I was going down to the farm in Mississippi, and I was going to be driving back and forth to New Orleans to work. And we actually made that happen. We left here, and I found a job in New Orleans as an engineer again. And then I got a letter from my spiritual master saying, please come back. He says, you can live a little bit outside the community if you want to. You can raise the money. He says, matter of fact, because of you and your wife having left here, we have decided that this is the way we're going to do business here now. Your householders. In other words, he had the foresight to see that that communal living here is in this country, in this city, in this community was not working. It was just not working. So the whole situation was changed at that time. Now, but after that time, we still had opportunities to perform devotional activities. For those who eventually would come to do full-time service here, their needs would be provided, and there were very few. Their needs were being provided by the temple, and then those of us who were working outside, we were asked also to go out on the weekends and help to raise funds for building this temple room and building the restaurant and getting those things going. So we did that. And we found that to be very, very satisfying work because we were dealing with other devotees, although they were not always very satisfying. I mean, they're people like we are, came from a strange background out there. But anyhow, we found out that the example that our spiritual master set was that one should use one's intelligence to serve as a Guru Maharaj. And if one can do that and work with like-minded people, then one can help other people to become knowledgeable. And I say knowledgeable, I don't say Krishna conscious necessarily, but that's what Krishna consciousness does, isn't it? It gives us knowledge about why we're here, where did we come from, what we should be doing, what was our destination after this body is finished, who am I? Am I this body? All those questions, then we would help others to answer just as we were given the opportunity to answer them for ourselves. And so this is part of our performing our own occupational duties, performing our dharma. We have the requirement. If we have families, we found ourselves in families, and I've got 5 kids, and I guess you call that a family. So you gotta maintain them. It's my duty to maintain them, or it was my wife's duty to maintain them. We're working together. We somehow or other did that. And we used whatever time we had apart from just working to try to help other people gain the knowledge that they need to get the heck out of this material world once their bodies are finished. and I never thought I'd make it to this age, but those of you who are still young people like you are not 50 yet. That's young. As a matter of fact, my oldest son is now into his mid-50s. And so we have to help other people to have the knowledge that we have. Because I think was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says, wherever you go, whoever you meet, do whatever you can to give them knowledge about Krishna. So I'm going to stop here and ask if anybody's got any experiences in your work life and then in your devotional life. I know some of us have done, Nrsinga Rupa he worked as a good family man for a time, still is, but he worked earning a livelihood to support his wife and his children, and then only at a more mature stage of his life has he taken up this. Does anybody have anything that they want to share about working in the outside world, and then working to try to spread Krishna consciousness to other people?
I can very much relate to much of what you said, specifically about working at UPS. That was what you said about being aware of the environment you're in, the association that you're amongst, where you're working. I can really relate to that. There were some actually very good Christian people that I worked with at UPS also, so it's not that everybody was...
There are good people out there.
But overall, the environment and it was...
Degraded, isn't it?
Degraded, yeah, it was very degraded. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. And then being able to now, this to be my work in comparison to that, it's night and day. It has its challenges, but it's so fulfilling and so meaningful to be serving like this. And so I could relate to a lot of the things you said. And you made a little comment about taking the boys out on hikes, and not sure if that was more than we needed, but I think it was exactly what we needed. So I don't know if 7 or 8 teenage boys, all of that energy, and it was very nice having you as a teacher.
Yeah, and in the case of our young people, just sitting in a classroom listening for 6 to 8 hours a day to someone lecture, that's really difficult, especially for the young men. Well, for the young women too, because you got hormones rushing through your system, and young men are kind of like young bulls. They have to be engaged in work, and they like to work. That's one thing you'll find out from our minister of cow protection, that the young animals like that, especially the males, they have to work, because if you don't work them, they're troublemakers. They'll take a fence down, they'll walk right through a fence and get over into your garden, get over into your neighbor's property. Even if they're neutered, they do that. But male cows are like any other species, I guess. They're looking to mate, and so that can be real troublesome. So the situation that Nrsinga Rupa was talking about is having to deal with a certain mentality of people. That can be a problem.
I just wanted to say one more thing about I'm switching back to the going out on walks. It was one of my favorite times of the day when I was a student, and you would say, go home, pack your bags, let's go for a walk. We all loved it. And then also Rupanuga had the great idea to put a workout bench and some weights in the room. So we would actually, during our breaks, lift weights, do push-ups, and it was a way for us to, get engaged.
And do a few shoulder stands, it seems like I remember.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any experience like that? Yes, please.
I work for a really small company. What I have seen is, like, when you do your work really nicely and responsibly, people appreciate it.
Hold on. Go on.
The other thing what has helped me is prashadam, cookies and brownies from the restaurant. So we have a Christmas party or any of such events. So every time I've taken, they have been really opened up. And this time for
Right. Hold on. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj would really like that. He encouraged my wife to do that, to cook something that she could send with me. And even now, when I go up to pick up the milk in Plano once a week, there's a young man up there whose name is Saul, and he's a young fellow and just as friendly and nice as he can be. And so I usually take something up there for him to munch on while he's working there. He's by himself. He can get pretty lonely except for customers coming in. And you know, our customers they sometimes just come in and buy what they want and they're out of there. They don't really try to form a relationship with them. But I found that, you know, anybody we come into contact with on a regular basis, that we can form some kind of relationship with them. And if you can't speak philosophy to them, then you can say, put this in your mouth. And that always works pretty well, I think, for a lot of people. That's as much of Krishna consciousness as they're going to be able to get, at least for a while. But that's a powerful weapon also. It's our undercover weapon.
For this Christmas, I made the bold move to give them some books.
Books.
I gave
The
them
people that you work with,
yes, bro.
and you still have the job.
That's good so far. I was a little intelligent. I gave them, my boss, he likes to cook. So I gave him Kurma Prabhu's cookbooks. And he was very appreciative. Like the next day only, like during the meeting, his wife said, she also works in the same company as us. So she was
really
like, oh, my husband just opened the cookbooks and he started making this and that. Okay, very good.
I've given out a few Bhagavad Gitas myself, and I will tell whoever I give them to, says, you might not be able to read this whole book, but read the introduction. If you can do that, and if you can read chapter 2, then that will be really good. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know, but that keeps them from feeling like they have to read the whole book. You know, sometimes it's a bit of a strain, especially nowadays. We're not used to reading books so much anymore, young people especially.
The other thing that happened was the couple of women in my office, they're really into reading books. Like this one lady reads like 200 books every year. So
200 books a year.
Yeah, and like she goes to all these conferences to read and all that. So
That's probably more than I read in a year.
So I was thinking which book to give her, and I was not sure whether I should give her a Bhagavad Gita because she's Christian. So to one lady I gave her Vanity Karma, like Jayadvaita Maharajas. He has yes.
Who? Oh, Jayadvaita Maharaj?
Yeah, it combines the biblical stuff with Bhagavad Gita, I think. It's a really nice book. And then to the other lady, I gave her a Journey Within. So far, I've not asked them anything, have you read or anything? Maybe one of these days I should kind of.
Achyuta Govinda Prabhu is one of the more active book distributors in our community, and I wonder sometimes, how does he do that? I think we're out of time now. Does anybody have anything that it's really burning that you need to ask before we go? Okay.
I really appreciate this topic. I drove bus for 9 years.
City bus?
Yeah, city bus and school bus, actually. And I found that it wasn't satisfying so much, but it was what I needed to do. But within it, I found that the most appreciative times was when I was helping teach the students, like, teaching lessons that were really practical. And anyways, I could go on about some of those things. But one thing I wanted to mention was I noticed that when I made a shift in my career to more of my nature, is that I could see through my work practically Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. I didn't have to, it was natural. Like, so my mistakes, it says in the Bhagavad Gita that even if done imperfectly, well, imperfectly, the mistakes that we make when we're in our nature are most valuable because they teach us how to make adjustments so that we can be more Krishna conscious, so that we can be better in our service towards Krishna. And it seems to me that when you're outside of your nature, it's just really, I'm not saying it's not possible, of course, Krishna can go beyond any material nature, but it just becomes more difficult. Becomes more difficult to see Bhagavad Gita actually working in your life and working in people's life. But you find the nature, oh, okay, this is how the three modes of material nature are working. Oh, this is how people are identifying with sense gratification and stuff. So that's one of the things that I wanted to mention.
Nothing quite as valuable as realized knowledge. Anything else? Tulsi? Gopika mantra.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking I could relate to what you were saying, Rupanuga Prabhu, about working in an environment that it wasn't really so much the job, it was the environment that was really troubling. When I worked in New York City, I was an office manager, and I worked with like some cool people, but it was just such a kind of in New York City, so it was very much kind of cutthroat, people trying to climb the corporate ladder and rumors going around about other people and, everybody, and I felt in that environment forced to really push myself materially to perform so that I could meet other people's standards, but that wasn't in my nature at all because quite frankly, I didn't care. I just wanted to do my job, do it well, and go home. I didn't want to play with any of the politics or listen to the rumors or avoid that person or whatever. So it was really, really exhausting. And then long story short, we had planned to move here and then COVID happened and we moved here faster. And I just, Radha Kalachandji arranged such a nice job for me where it's much more, I'm an executive assistant, so I can work more one-on-one with people and I don't have to listen to politics. And just the environment of this job is very different. Nobody's trying to climb anything. It's much more collaborative. And I work from home like 3 days a week, so I can come for Srimad Bhagavatam class. So it just feels so much more like I get to be in an environment that's better for me, and I do my job, and then the job is done. And I can be more of who I really am rather than trying to perform as this person that that somebody corporate wants me to be. So, and that's done a lot for my mental health and my relationships. So yeah, thank you.
Sometimes I think, Manjari Gopika Devi, that Krishna allows us to be in situations in which we are very uncomfortable. And then when we find ourselves in a situation that is more comfortable, then I think that is also coming as His mercy. But it could be that He is helping us to see that we can maybe express ourselves, our Krishna consciousness, to others in some way, even if we have to do it in a very covert way. Still, He is moving us from place to place, and if we're in a place that He doesn't want us to be, then there's a possible reason that He allows us to take a whacking. And I've been whacked a couple of times in jobs that I've been in. Means that I have been not very happy and satisfied at all, and I didn't do a job like someone else wanted it done. So whenever we find ourselves in a position that is a little bit nicer, and then we can also express our Krishna consciousness to try to help other people, then I take that as a real benediction.